March 6, 2025. A quiet residential street in Dias D'Ávila, Brazil. 6 people gathered in a 2-story house for what should have been just another night of drinks and conversation. But before sunrise, 3 of them would be dead, executed in cold blood. 1 survivor would flee the state in terror, and 2 men, one of them a police officer sworn to protect, would face over a century in prison for what prosecutors are calling a premeditated massacre, fueled by jealousy, humiliation, and rage. This is the story of the Dias D'Ávila Massacre, a case that shocked Brazil and exposed the deadly consequences when fragile egos meet firearms. What really happened in that house? Why did 2 men return in the dead of night to kill their friends? And what role did a casual comment about a double bed play in triggering this nightmare? Dias D'Ávila sits just outside Salvador, in Brazil's northeastern state of Bahia. It's a working-class municipality of about 75,000 people, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone else's business. The Imbachai neighborhood, where our story unfolds, is typical of the area. Modest homes, narrow streets, and a community that keeps to itself. The house on Rua Parque Nossa Senhora de Lourdes was a 2-story rental property. Officially, it was leased by 18-year-old Giovanna Vitoria Vilela de Mello, though she didn't actually live there. The house was primarily used by 27-year-old Jailma Barbosa dos Santos and her 19-year-old friend Raissa. Both women were young mothers trying to make ends meet. Jailma had 3 children. Raissa had a 3-year-old. Giovanna herself was the mother of a 1-year-old and lived with her parents just down the same street, in a house at the back of the property. On the evening of March 6th, the 3 women were out at a local bar, enjoying a rare night of freedom. They were joined by Henrique Silva Borges dos Santos, a bank employee who was romantically involved with Jailma. As the night wore on, Henrique suggested they continue the party at the house in Imbachai. It seemed like a harmless idea, a chance to keep the good times rolling in a more private setting. They weren't alone for long. 2 more men joined the gathering. Alison Santiago dos Santos, a military police officer assigned to the special platoon of the 10th Independent Police Company, and his friend Estevam Yuri dos Santos, who had romantic ties to Giovanna. According to investigators, the group settled in with drinks and drugs. The atmosphere initially relaxed and casual. 6 people, 1 house. A night that should have ended with hangovers and laughter. But beneath the surface, tensions were already beginning to simmer. The exact nature of what happened inside that house would become the subject of fierce debate, conflicting testimonies, and a legal battle that continues to this day. What we know for certain is that by the time the sun rose on March 7th, half of the people in that house would be dead, and the other half would be running for their lives, or from the law. The stage was set, the players were in position, and the countdown to tragedy had begun. What happens next depends on who you ask. According to police investigators, the atmosphere in the house that night was one of uninhibited partying. The group consumed alcohol and drugs, and the investigation would later suggest that there was a consensual decision to engage in group sexual activity, what the media would sensationally label an orgy. But this narrative is hotly disputed. Raissa, the only survivor from inside the house, vehemently denies this version of events. She insists that she and the other women were not sex workers and that no such activity took place. Her defense team echoes this, arguing that the police characterization is both inaccurate and deeply damaging to the reputations of the victims. It's a crucial point of contention because the alleged sexual encounter forms the foundation of the prosecution's theory about motive. What is clearer is that at some point during the night, tensions erupted. The trigger, according to police reports, was a comment made by Henrique, the banker. He made some kind of remark about a double bed, a comment that was interpreted rightly or wrongly as an insinuation about homosexual activity. The exact wording is lost to conflicting accounts, but the effect was immediate and explosive. Allison, the police officer, reportedly became enraged, his masculinity challenged, his pride wounded. He announced that he was leaving, but that he would return to prove he was a man. It was a chilling statement, one that would take on sinister meaning just hours later. Meanwhile, Estevam was nursing his own grievances. He had been displaying jealousy toward Henrique, apparently feeling threatened by the attention the banker was giving to Giovanna, the young woman Estevam had feelings for. The two men left the house together, riding off on a motorcycle into the night. Their departure should have been the end of it. A bruised ego, a jealous boyfriend, both walking away to cool off. But this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something much darker. Raicha left shortly after, claiming she had another commitment. She would later say she had no idea what was about to unfold, no sense of the danger brewing. Her departure may have saved her life. Inside the house, 3 people remained: Jailma, Giovanna, and Henrique. They had no reason to believe the night would end in anything other than sleep and eventual goodbyes. They were wrong, dead wrong. Around 3 o'clock in the morning on March 7th, neighbors on Rua Parque Nossa Senhora de Lourdes heard the sound of a motorcycle approaching. 2 figures dismounted and walked toward the 2-story house. There was no forced entry, no kicked-in door, no smashed windows. Whoever opened that door knew the men on the other side. They trusted them enough to let them in. That trust was fatal. What happened next was captured not by cameras inside the house, but by the terrified testimony of neighbors who heard the violence unfold. Gunshots rang out through the quiet residential street. Screams pierced the night. Witnesses would later report hearing a woman's voice crying out in desperation, "Don't shoot, love, don't shoot!" It was a plea that went unanswered. Inside, the scene was one of calculated brutality. Henrique was shot to death. The exact number of bullets and their placement would become part of the forensic evidence, but the intent was unmistakable. This was an execution. Jailma and Giovanna, the 2 young mothers, were also killed. Some reports suggest they were stabbed. Others indicate gunshot wounds. The divergence in accounts speaks to the chaos of the scene and the challenges investigators faced in piecing together the exact sequence of events. But certain facts were undeniable. 3 people who had been alive and laughing just hours before were now corpses. 3 families were about to receive the worst news of their lives, and 2 men had vanished into the pre-dawn darkness, leaving behind a crime scene that would shock even seasoned homicide detectives. The murders appeared to have been committed by people the victims knew and trusted. There was no sign of robbery, no indication of a home invasion gone wrong. This was personal. This was revenge. And the killers had left behind a trail that investigators would soon begin to follow. As the sun rose over Dias D'Ávila, the first responders arrived to find a house of horrors. The community, already struggling with crime and the influence of drug trafficking organizations like Comando Vermelho, was plunged into a new kind of fear. This wasn't gang violence. This wasn't a cartel hit. This was something perhaps even more disturbing. Friends turning on friends, a night of partying ending in cold-blooded murder. The investigation was about to begin, and it would uncover a web of jealousy, humiliation, and deadly pride. In the immediate aftermath of the massacre, investigators faced significant obstacles. Dias D'Ávila's Imbatsai neighborhood is an area where the Comando Vermelho drug trafficking organization holds considerable influence. Residents are often reluctant to speak to police, fearing retaliation. Initial reports suggested the house might have been a drug den, a theory that further complicated the investigation and cast unwarranted suspicion on the victims. But homicide detectives persisted, methodically building their case. Security camera footage from the area was reviewed, cell phone records were analyzed, text messages were recovered, and a picture began to emerge of what had transpired that night. The evidence pointed to 2 men, Alison Santiago dos Santos, the military police officer, and Estevam Yuri dos Santos, his civilian friend. On March 13th, just a week after the murders, Alison turned himself in at the police station, accompanied by his lawyer. He was immediately arrested and transferred to the Bataillon de Choque, a specialized police facility. 7 days later, on March 20th, Estevam was located and arrested without resistance. Both men invoked their right to remain silent, declining to provide statements to investigators and indicating they would only testify in court. Prosecutors moved swiftly to charge both men with triple homicide, with aggravating circumstances. 2 of the murders, those of Jailma and Giovanna, were classified as feminicide, the gender-based killing of women, which carries enhanced penalties under Brazilian law. The prosecution's theory is that Alison and Estevam acted together as co-perpetrators, planning and executing the murders in a premeditated attack motivated by jealousy, wounded pride, and rage. If convicted, each man faces over a century in prison. The case has garnered significant attention throughout Brazil, both for its brutality and for the involvement of a police officer. Public reaction has been intense. ranging from demands for justice to inappropriate jokes and memes on social media, a callous response that has only added to the suffering of the victims' families. Raicha, the survivor, fled the state of Bahia in fear for her life. She has stated publicly that she will only return if the accused men are convicted and imprisoned. She continues to dispute the police narrative about the nature of the gathering, insisting that she and her friends were not engaged in prostitution or the alleged group sex. Her testimony will be crucial at trial, though her absence from the scene during the actual murders means she cannot provide direct evidence of what happened. The families of Jailma, Giovanna, and Henrique are demanding not only justice, but also a public correction of the record if the orgy narrative proves unfounded. They argue that their loved ones have been defamed in death, their memories tarnished by salacious speculation. Meanwhile, investigators continue to search for answers to the many questions that remain: the exact timeline of events, the true nature of the relationships between all 6 people, and whether the house had any connection to criminal activity beyond this single night of violence. As the case moves toward trial, one thing is certain: the Dias D'Ávila Massacre has left scars that will never fully heal. This case is a stark reminder that violence often erupts from the most mundane circumstances: a casual comment, a perceived slight, jealousy simmering beneath the surface. 3 people lost their lives not because they were involved in criminal enterprises or caught in gang crossfire, but because 2 men couldn't control their rage and wounded pride. Jailma, Giovanna, and Henrique were young people with their whole lives ahead of them, parents with children who will now grow up without them. The legal process in Brazil moves slowly, and the trial of Alison Santiago dos Santos and Estevam Yuri dos Santos may take months or even years to conclude. But the evidence appears strong, and prosecutors are confident in their case. What remains to be seen is whether justice will be served, whether the full truth of that night will ever be known, and whether the community of Dias D'Ávila can begin to heal from this tragedy. If this case affected you, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Share this video to help spread awareness about these victims and the importance of holding perpetrators accountable, no matter their position or authority. Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and as always, remember the victims: Yailma Barbosa dos Santos, Giovanna Vitoria Vilela de Melo, and Henrique Silva Borges dos Santos. May they rest in peace, and may their families find the justice they deserve.